All right, this one's for Paco. Gambled and you lost. The rest of us were here to pay the cost. Cowboy to the end. If only your truck would have made that bend. So many times before when you walked out my door. What would have happened if I...
Well, thank you for tuning in to the Mile High Show. This is Matt Santos, your host. You are listening to episode number 171. Now, all of our back episodes, our archives are available at milehighshow.com. And please, we encourage you, use that Amazon link that's right there at milehighshow.com. It's listed in every episode show notes. There's a banner right there on the bottom of the page, on the bottom of most of the page there at milehighshow.com. What it does is you click on it, and it takes you directly to your standard Amazon or your Amazon Prime login page, and you log in and you shop like you normally will. You know you're buying stuff online anyway. I know we all want to support local. We all want to contribute to the local economies where we live, especially in an area like I live in where there's a lot of smaller mom and pop businesses, and I understand that. And we do that. We record in and around a lot of the local independent restaurants. We buy a lot of our gear and goods and services from local vendors. And I understand that, but there are times when you got to buy stuff online. You just have to, economically wise and convenience wise, and sometimes there's just stuff you can't get locally. I understand that. I'm not saying don't support local businesses, because I want you to, especially support local photographers and local local podcasts, stuff like that. But when you have to shop online, when you have to send something to somebody, maybe you're sending something across country or around the world, whatever, you're using Amazon. We know you are. Use that Amazon link at milehighshow.com, and this is why. Doesn't cost you anything extra, but every month Amazon says, hey, you're getting to us through milehighshow.com. We're going to give them a little thank you. We're going to give them a little, a little change, a little money. And that's a way you can support this show, support me, a local independent podcaster, with, 3 or 4 listeners every week. And you also are supporting the artists that we support, the artists, the authors, the musicians, the interesting folks, the comics. By supporting us, by using that Amazon link, you're supporting the guys that we support, the guys and gals that we support, including today's guest, Mr. Brad Courtney. Now, Brad, I've been wanting to sit down with him for quite a while. He is the self-proclaimed, official, unofficial, whatever you want to call it, historian of Prescott's Whiskey Row. Now, he's got an interesting story. We talked about where he grew up and how he ended up out here in Arizona and why he chose to document the history of Whiskey Row. But he has a book that came out a couple of years ago, Prescott's Original Whiskey Row. You can get that book, see the tie-in here, by using that Amazon link at milehighshow.com. Now, there's other ways you can get it. You can get it at local booksellers. You can get it right up and down the row at a couple of shops right there adjacent to the St. Michael's. If you're local, if you're not local, milehighshow.com, Amazon link. Put money in my pocket, because then I can afford to drive around and interview interesting authors and artists and musicians and all those great people like Brad Courtney. Again, his book, Prescott's Original Whiskey Row, you can also get it by going to whiskeyrowbooks.com and ordering it there. You can also see some video interviews with Brad and learn about his process of what he's doing to preserve the history of Whiskey Row. He's got a new book in the works that he's taken his time working on. We talk a little bit about that. It's kind of centered around the 1900 fire, early 1900s, the fire that kind of decimated Whiskey Row. You can also follow him on Whiskey Row Books on Facebook. Today's music is provided by, I'm not sure what cuts I'm going to use, what tracks I'm going to use, but the intro and outro will both be by Danny Romero, former guest of the show, a frequent guest of the show. His info is at DannyRomeroMusic.com. Including on there are some nice video clips that I've done, some photos that I've done, some photos that other local photographers have done, and information about Danny Romero, the true cowboy musician and poet that haunts the local honky tonks and bars and saloons around Prescott and Central Arizona, including the Palace, which is where we recorded this interview with Brad Courtney. HistoricPalace.com is where you can find out information about them, the food, the history. We talk a lot about the Palace because it's such an anchor, such a cornerstone of Prescott's Whiskey Row. It's a beautiful bar, beautiful saloon, great restaurant, and they also have some really good music because Danny Romero was getting ready to set up and play while we were recording. He plays there every Friday from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. and then all around Arizona, down into Wickenburg, Cave Creek, New River, different places all over the place. But every Friday, Danny is there at the Palace. HistoricPalace.com and DannyRomeroMusic.com is where you can find out information about both of those entities. And again, WhiskeyRowBooks.com for Brad Courtney's info. Now, I love the Palace. It's a great spot to hang out and just people watch. There are you just got to go if you're ever in Arizona, specifically in the Prescott area. But even if not, if you're in we're 4 hours from Vegas, shoot on down. Get in your car and shoot on down. If you're in Phoenix, we're a couple hours north. But Prescott's Whiskey Row and that whole downtown area is filled with historic buildings that are just they're not like a museum type thing. They're working buildings. They're retailers. They're restaurants. They're bars. They're shops, gift shops, clothing stores, hat stores, restaurants, everything. And they're just working. But they're buildings that have been there for, well over 100 years. It's just a beautiful downtown. Now, years ago, mid-1990s, my wife and I, soon after we got married, Mrs. Mile High Show, we hopped on a commuter train. We lived in California, hopped on a commuter train and went from Oakland, a couple-hour trip to Old Town Sacramento, the Amtrak station in Sacramento. Walking distance from the Capitol. We just kind of went out for like a day trip. And there's a beautiful train museum, railroad museum right there in Old Town. Gorgeous. It's beautiful. It's a lot of fun, a lot of interaction. And it's adjacent to these old buildings, like 4 or 5 old streets and blocks of restaurants and things. And it's the Old West, the Old Town Sacramento. And we loved it. We had a blast. Again, that was in the mid-90s. And hadn't really been back. And then in the early 2000s, 2004, we moved out to Arizona, to the Prescott area. We're in a town up a little north of Prescott. And it didn't really dawn on me that what they were trying to replicate in Sacramento is anyway, about a month ago, we went back to Sacramento for a family function and decided to take our son to Old Town Sacramento. Showed him the train museum. He loved it. And we walked through Old Town. And that was the first time I had been in Old Town Sacramento since the mid-90s. And it struck me that as much as I liked it before, since we have now spent over a decade in the Prescott area, walking through these buildings that it looks like Old Town was trying to replicate, it just looked cheap in Sacramento. When we were there a month or so ago, it just felt like the Disneyland, the amusement park version of what an Old West town should be. And here we live so close to, and I spend so much time working in and around a true, authentic, historical downtown area. And it really made me appreciate Prescott's Whiskey Row. It really made me appreciate places like the historic Palace Saloon and Restaurant. And in turn, really appreciate folks like like Brad Courtney and Danny Romero, who are keeping that feeling, that atmosphere, that culture alive. So I hope you enjoy my talk with Brad Courtney. Pick up a copy of his book, Prescott's Original Whiskey Row. You can get it at whiskeyrowbooks@gmail.com or at whiskeyrowbooks.com. You can order it that way and get a signed copy, or just kind of cruise around Whiskey Row if you're in town and find Brad hanging out at the Palace. He's usually got a couple of books in his bag. You slip him a 20 and he'll sign one for you and have a good time. Have him tell you a couple of stories. Listen to the show, go on iTunes, give us a rating and a review, and pick up your copy of Prescott's Original Whiskey Row by Brad Courtney, the guest on the show today.
We're at Brad's table.
We're at Brad's
This is
table.
Brad's table, baby.
Sitting with Brad Courtney, the I don't know, could we call you the official historian of Whiskey Row, or is it the unofficial, or is it just barfly?
I am
What's
the
easiest?
self-proclaimed official Whiskey Row historian.
Now,
Palace historian. I'll take it all.
Now, what I really want to do is talking with you, and I've been wanting to sit down with you for quite some time, is to obviously talk about your book, and that book is Prescott's Original Whiskey Row. That's one of your books. You've got a couple out there, right?
No, not right now. I'm working on a second one. I wrote a hiking book way back in the 80s when I lived up on the res, and that's out of print now. But so it's the only book in print at the moment, and since I come to Prescott, I've kind of dedicated myself to writing the history of Whiskey Row because no one had done it before.
Which is amazing to me because there are so many stories. So there's a couple of things. Like I said, one, I wanted to sit down and get to know you a little bit better. We've talked a lot sitting here listening to Danny Romero play some music.
And we're best friends on Facebook.
Yeah, and we're there. Oh, man, they just let anybody stroll into this place. So I wanted to sit down, talk to you, just get to know you a little bit better. Of course, talk about your book, encourage people to pick it up and check it out. Where can they get it? Again, Prescott's Original Whiskey Row.
Well, my favorite place to recommend people going to is the Old Sage Bookshop right there in the St. Michael's.
Oh, nice.
There.
So there at the St. Michael's Hotel.
That's my favorite place. Yeah, right there, the shops there.
Shop locally?
Yeah, Old Sage Bookshop. But you can get it on Amazon.
I was going to say.
From me. You can get it on Barnes & Noble.
That's great for the folks that live here or travel through Prescott.
Right.
But we got, man, this is big time. We got listeners all over the world. So you got to go to Amazon. So you know how they do it. They go to milehighshow.com and click that Amazon link. See that little commercial I did? Click that Amazon link.
I got one. I got one for you. Or if you want a signed copy, you can email me at whiskeyrowbooks@gmail.com.
Nice.
But to be honest with you, you can get it cheaper on Amazon. I hate to say it,
but you don't get
they keep lowering the price.
You don't get that personal signature like I got in mine that I just picked up.
Yeah, for $20 whiskey money.
Now, for folks familiar and most of my listeners are. And like I said, we are literally around the world. We got listeners over in Europe. We got them across the U.S., Australia. But the big bulk of our listenership is right here in Arizona.
Good.
Streaming down to Phoenix, as well as a lot of folks right here in Yavapai County. So most of the people hearing this are familiar with, of course, Whiskey Row and the Palace, because the Palace is the basically one of the cornerstones of the Row.
I would say the jewel. The jewel of the Row.
But there are so many stories about Whiskey Row and about the Palace in particular.
Right.
So that's another reason I wanted to talk with you, so we can hear a few of those stories. We just want to wet their whistle a little bit, so they'll go out and get the book.
Right.
But you also have, in the past, and maybe soon, again, I know you took a little break of doing some of the tours and stuff, because you have a couple of Facebook pages as well.
I have
Let's direct people to those.
Yeah. Actually, I started a Facebook page. It was Whiskey Row Books. And then,
Smile, you're on camera.
Hey. I don't smile good.
Go ahead, I'm sorry. See.
But anyway, we're getting our picture taken. I need my hat on. Just for a minute. Yeah, we got. Thank you. We should do this more often. We're in the right.
He likes his girls are just running up taking his picture. They loving it.
I wish you had a visual of that. That was good. I forgot what I was saying.
So your Facebook page.
Yeah. So I started out was a page for my book. But as soon as I made the page Whiskey Row history in general and wasn't publicizing the book, because my whole goal is to promote Whiskey Row and its history, because I believe when I started researching for it, I have a seat, Tommy. Tommy's got some stories.
Tommy, sit down.
We're getting lots of attention. Everybody should be watching this.
I'm gonna share table space with you right here.
Brad Stable Boy.
I'm not. I can't take this up.
So
Well, I would say,
start the Facebook page.
Yeah. Hello, everybody. I should be mic'd up for the whole thing here.
No, Danny and I are talking about doing some live shows, because I've done some live shows with an audience. We do the PA system, get some music mixed in, some comedy and things. We're talking about doing one here to again celebrate the history of Whiskey Row and the Palace. So you start this Facebook page.
Yeah.
And where is that? Where can folks find the Facebook page?
It's just Whiskey Row history. Like I said, I started out to promote my book, but I felt a little guilty about that, because my real goal is not just the book, but like you said, I've been doing tours, Whiskey Row history tours. I've taken a little time off because of a personal tragedy in my life. But
no, I didn't say that.
and through articles, I write articles. I'm going to be published in True West magazine pretty soon. I write for the Courier sometimes.
Now, let's drop back a little bit. How did that start? Is this hometown for you? Is this where you were born and raised?
No.
Where was the Courtney? Where did the Courtney clan hail from?
The Courtney clan, I was actually born in Lexington, Kentucky, and I don't have any memory of that.
Isn't there a prison there or no? That's Leavenworth.
Yeah, I don't know. I know there's a hospital there because I was born in that hospital, but prison, I don't know. Maybe it's
I was thinking Leavenworth. That's Kansas.
That's
stuff.
Kansas.
It's an L and a K. That's all I know.
Yeah, sounds. You got that first that first syllable has the same short.
So born in Kentucky.
Born in Kentucky, but I grew up in Michigan on a farm, and a very small town called Minden, and I lived like 4 miles out. I lived on actually it was a cattle farm for a while. Some people say I shouldn't say cattle farm, but it was a cattle farm. It wasn't a ranch.
Yeah.
We had like 80 head. But then my dad did something incredible. So I called myself a cowboy. I mean, I loved it because I had plans on raising cattle myself. And I was probably maybe a junior in high school, and he sold those cattle, and he bought chickens. He bought 75,000 chickens.
Oh, man.
That lay eggs, those, you've seen them, the horrible barns where they got rows and there's a row on top and they poop on top of the...
And that is some nasty animals.
And that was the worst. Oh, God, that was a nightmare. So, but it made my dad wealthy, and he was kind of the chicken king of Southwest Michigan, which made me the chicken prince. And I had no desire whatsoever to be the chicken prince. Plus, chicken farmers don't have cool hats like cowboys. They have a cool hat. And it stunk.
But they get to wear them little Western ties like Colonel Sanders.
Oh, yeah, but there's no romance in it at all. So I packed my bags and got down the I-40, and I took a job on the Navajo Indian Reservation as a teacher, and I spent 12 years there, and I loved it.
Now, what towns are up in there? Where are you talking about?
I lived in Tuba City.
Tuba City,
Yep.
Now, I've lived in Arizona since 2004.
Yeah.
Haven't explored a whole lot of it, but is that up by like Page and up that way? Or
It's 75 miles from Page and 75 miles from, it's right between Flagstaff and Page.
Gotcha, okay.
And I worked at a boarding school there, and like I said, loved it. And then
What were you teaching?
I started out teaching PE.
Oh, wow.
I was a great scholar. I taught PE.
I would have voted history in that, but no, PE.
No, there's not much history being taught in schools nowadays.
No,
But,
yeah.
I taught it because I sneaked it in, because I later got a
The
master's
history
in
of basketball.
I did. Yeah, I knew more of that at the time, actually. And then in the summers, I would do river trips down to Colorado.
Oh, nice.
Because I loved it. I mean, it was just,
Now-
I never would have left, but you know how life gets in the way. And
Now, what part of Michigan were you? Because obviously, from what I know, not obviously, I shouldn't say that, but from what I know of Michigan, cold,
oh, yeah.
snow,
Yeah.
and then you come to the middle of the desert.
I got friends coming tonight.
Yeah.
They're leaving snow.
Yeesh.
From Michigan. They're coming from Michigan. 3 of my high school friends are coming. And they texted me and said, please don't let there be any snow. So we don't have to worry about that. But Yeah, it was. I did love it. It was a beautiful country. It was lakes.
So how long were you up there?
The res?
In the res, yeah.
On the res for 12 years.
Yeah.
12 years, and then, like I said, life got in the way. I had kids, and I promised to raise them down in Phoenix, so I spent 19 long years in Phoenix teaching in the inner
Teaching
city.
as well?
Yeah. I taught 6th grade. 6th grade.
That's a good
I forgot
age.
your question. I've gone way off.
No, that's right. I'm going to change the name of the podcast from the Mile High Show to Tangents, because that's all we do.
Yeah,
on it. Now, what? That's a good age, though. 6th grade.
I love it.
Yeah. What is that? It's like 12? 11, 12,
11,
13?
12, yeah. So, yeah, they come in, and they're still like kids. And the strange thing happens after Christmas, they turn into junior high kids. I mean, they really do.
Yeah.
They change, and everybody noticed it. But it was an age where you could kind of talk to them like adults.
Yeah.
But they were still kids.
But they haven't started getting all freaked out with teenage years
Yeah,
yet.
they're just starting to do that.
Yeah.
So.
What were you teaching? Was it just general ed?
Yeah,
Was it a little bit of everything?
Yeah, 6th grade me, I taught everything. Except for the specials like PE. Stuff like that. But I enjoyed it. And then I guess the question was how I ended up here. Was that the question?
I don't know. It don't matter.
Well, how did I end up here? So, growing up on a farm, living on the res, doing river trips, my thing was the outdoors. And big city, Phoenix, just wasn't.
Whereabouts were you in Phoenix? What area?
Cactus.
Yeah.
Around 35th Avenue and Cactus. But I taught in Camelback, right below Grand Canyon University.
So that's like what's now between 17 and 101 on the west side.
Yeah, I was just a few miles down from 17.
Yeah. Not what you would call a jewel of the valley.
No. I lived in a nice little pocket. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
So, but where I taught was really inner city, so we had all the problems associated with, living in the inner city.
Now, what years are we talking about? What?
I think I moved down there. I think I started in '93, and I ended up. I think I retired in 2012.
Now, in the late '70s and mid '80s, there was a huge population boom in Phoenix, but it was really growing through the '90s as well, right? It's kind of tapered off a little bit, but it went from '70s small town, basically Phoenix, a pocket, to just ballooning to a metropolis. So they're probably still suffering from some of them growing pains.
I remember flying in from the 80s, and I'd flow from Michigan, then I'd drive up to the res.
Yeah.
And looking down, it looked like a lot of desert,
Yeah.
Of course, you could see swimming pools down there, too, but it was a lot of brown,
Now it's just gray concrete when you're flying over.
Yeah, you flying now, especially at night, the lights go on
and it just all blends together, Phoenix, Glendale, it's just kind of all one.
And it starts way the heck out there. But I think when I first moved there, I think it was the 10th largest city in the United States. Now it's like 4th or 5th.
Yeah.
It just grew.
And it's not getting much prettier.
Yeah. Well, I remember my class size, the size of my school went up. I think there was 4 6th grade classes, and by the time I left, there was 8 or 9.
Oh, wow.
So, it grew. So my wife and I would start coming up to Prescott, and just to visit, drive up for the day, and then we'd stay at a cottage.
Get out of the heat a little bit.
Yeah, the heat didn't bother me that much,
Really?
but the city did.
Yeah,
the city.
yeah.
They call this everybody's hometown, and it kind of feels that way. It became like my hometown, and we would rent a cottage and overlooking Lynx Creek, and we just couldn't get enough of it. So it came time I thought I was going to get a teaching job up here, but it worked out so I could retire.
Nice.
And I did. So we bought a getaway cabin out in the mountains there in 2011, and that was our getaway spot. And then I was able to retire in 2012.
Nice.
And that's where I live now. So recently my wife passed away, so I'm living out in the mountains alone. I'm a mountain man out there, But
fairly recently. I remember we were talking a couple weeks ago, and what a good outpouring of support here, right within this building of your friends coming.
The palace
coming
allowed
together
me to
for
have
you.
a celebration of my wife's life here.
Yeah.
And they were just so generous. They gave us the room. It was just great. But like I said, when I got here, I went because I have a master's in history, and I wanted to get all the books on my new hometown,
Yeah.
the history of Prescott, especially Whiskey Row, because I really became enamored with it.
Legendary.
Yeah, it was so famous, and I'm thinking there must be a bunch of books about it, but lo and behold, not one book. It was mentioned in articles, in books. There might be a chapter or something like that.
Now, did you know about the Prescott area before coming to Arizona?
I did not. I never heard of it.
I had not either.
Yeah.
My brother moved out here in early '04, and then not following that, completely unrelated. I got a job transfer out here in the tail end of '04, and as I'm telling people at my current job, I'm saying, I'm moving to a place called Prescott. It's in Arizona. It's north of Phoenix. A couple of guys really knew because they were really into, and the Fippen Museum. They knew about that. They'd actually done some trips out. One of them was an artist, amateur artist, very dynamite, William Barker, dynamite artist, but he loved the Old West art.
And that's a great...
So he knew about Prescott. I knew nothing about it. Then I move out here. One of the second, third nights we were here, we came down and checked out the row. My brother lived here in Prescott. And then from then on, I'm watching these old movies that I had seen as a kid, these movies from the 30s, 40s, 50s, these old Westerns. Thank you. And they're talking about, we're taking a trip up to Prescott. We're going up to Prescott. These old Western movies. It started clicking that this place this is the living history.
When you watch those shows, it's amazing how many times Prescott comes up.
Yeah.
And they say Prescott, too. They don't say Prescott.
One of the most famous ones that you hear it mentioned is in... movies surrounding the Tombstone lore, the Earp family and stuff, and that kind of brings us up into here. So you start doing the research. What was your first trip into the palace like? Do you remember some of the early visits here?
It must have been in the 80s, and I just remember looking at it and go, man, this is the real deal here.
Now, how much has it changed?
I can't really tell you. I can't because I can't remember. Actually, I came up here with my best friend. He worked for the Veterans Administration. They had some kind of goings on at the hospital there, and we went to Matt's Saloon next door. And one of the first times I ever heard about Prescott was the true story of Bruce Springsteen riding through with his posse.
On his way to Vegas or something?
Yeah.
I had heard a couple different versions.
And he stopped in here at the palace at first. And was having beer, then everybody got a wind that it was here, and then the whole town started showing up. And he ends up over at Matt's, and they have that balcony,
the elevated stage thing. Yeah,
and the band was playing, and he went up there and played a whole bunch of songs, and I guess to play. What I wouldn't have given to seen that. You know what I mean?
Now, one of the big recognitions of this in modern times of the palace is depicted on that back wall there in that big mural of Junior Bonner. Again, saw it as a kid, saw it over the years several times. It wasn't until I lived in this area that I made the connection. This is where it was.
Yeah, that's
and
a real...
And there's scenes filmed right in here and across the way and at the fairgrounds.
It's not a fictional place, because it kind of seems fictional in the movie, but there really was a Prescott.
Yeah. So what are some of the because you hear a lot of different stories and lore and legends, and like anything else, in all the tall tales, there's a little bit of truth and a little bit of tall tale. What are some of the myths about Whiskey Row that you've heard over the years that have proved to not be factual? What are some of the...
It's really interesting. That was something I ran into. To start with, I was hoping everyone would be true. I would just find documentation on it, and I'd tell the story again. But and the problem is that some of these stories are on the historic markers out here,
like the date that's right out there.
Right there. One of the things I ran into was the palace's starting date is listed as 1877 on there, and I just took that for granted because it says something on, I was researching chronologically through the papers, and I saw the little blurb there that said the palace was opening, and it sounded just like this palace. It was opened by a marshal named Standifer and a guy, Gilman Shaw, and and then I saw that mention, and I figured it must be this palace.
Yeah.
But I kept researching and never showed up again, and I go, holy cow. And then another palace showed up in 1882.
Yeah.
Not that recent. But and it didn't last very long. I'm thinking, and it was on Montezuma Street as well. It was a palace. So, and then a third palace showed up on Goodwin Street, and that's the one that actually ended up being associated with this one.
Gotcha.
But let me get to the good news. The good news is that the palace's origins actually trace back to 1874.
So earlier.
Yeah.
3 years earlier than the...
It's by far more vintage than any other saloon. And the reason for that is because this is actually a merger of two saloons. The Cabinet Saloon was I call it the heartbeat of Whiskey Row. And then there was, where we're sitting right now, it actually wasn't any part of the saloon. There were two saloons to the side of us. There was the Palace... I'm pointing. Can everybody see that?
Well, here, let me hold the microphone up to your arm.
Yeah. Cabinet Saloon was to the south, and the Palace was to the north, and we're sitting where there was a middle part.
Right in the middle.
There. So after the fire of 1900, these guys had the two most popular saloons, and they were friends, so they decided to merge, and they created this magnificent place.
Now let's talk about that fire a little bit, because there is the famous story that as the row was burning, the folks were so interested in continuing their liquid refreshments that they just picked the bar up, chopped the bar out, picked it up, carried it across the way, and sat and kept on drinking.
And this is one of my favorite things to talk about because in my book.
Your book, Prescott's Original Whiskey Row, available on Amazon at themilehighshow.com, Amazon link. Go ahead.
WhiskeyRowBooks@gmail.com. But
who gets the plug here? Come on.
Now. Yeah. In Mile High Show. So when I first got here, most of the local historians, the serious historians, believed that was a made-up myth.
Yeah.
And I didn't. It was my favorite Whiskey Row story. You know, the bar being pulled out, and then they just keep drinking, and they pull out the whiskey, and they pulled out the everything else. You know.
Yeah.
But and sure, this is kind of complicated to talk about. But when the palace moved over here from Goodwin Street after it burned down, can you imagine that? Something burning down in Prescott. But the 83 palace burned down on Goodwin Street, and it moved over here to our north on 118 Montezuma. We're sitting on 120 Montezuma. This is where it gets complicated. I need to draw it all out. But and when it moved from there, Goodwin Street to Montezuma Street, guess why it was able to move to Montezuma Street?
Why'd that?
Because it was all burned out.
Oh, empty space. Kind of like the old birdcage down the street where now they got that holiday courtyard.
There was a fire in 83 that took out half of Whiskey Row, most of it, and so there's lots were open. And then the palace, which 2 weeks before that fire was built, was opened on Goodwin Street in February of 84. It burned down too, and they decided to move over here.
Yeah.
You know, so that's how the palace ended up on Montezuma Street, because everything kept burning down. And then the third time it burned down again. But what was I talking about?
The bar, the story of them yanking it out.
You're right. We call this tangents. But when it was rebuilt on Montezuma Street, the bar they put into the palace was said to be made of solid walnut. And I saw that because I'd sat at the bar here, which is cherry and mahogany and everything else.
And beautiful.
And I saw that, and I go, oh, crap. That's not the same bar. But guess what happened in 1897?
What's that?
Burned down. It burned, except this time because...
This sounds like an episode of The Sopranos.
It was an accident. Yeah,
why are you doing that with your fingers?
It wasn't anything to do with... Junior and Junior Soprano or anything like that, or some kind of hit being. But anyway, it in 1897, the palace. It's only the palace burned because when it was rebuilt after it moved. It was rebuilt here in 1884. It was rebuilt with brick and iron and all kinds of stuff. So the fire was contained, but it burned that bar. So they had to get a new bar. So I kind of followed, and I'd already written in my book that it probably wasn't true of the palace bar being pulled out during the fire. I was in the final editing stages, And it was like 2 o'clock at night, and I'm researching, and I was researching something else, and I came across this fire in 1897. And then in December, I think it was December 28th, there was a report about a bar being put in. It was beautiful, made of cherry, mahogany.
What you're looking at
and
right
what
now.
we're looking at right now. And actually, there's a picture behind us over here that shows the bar before the fire.
Oh, nice.
It's really rare, and you can tell that's it.
That's the same.
Yeah.
Nice.
My wife was asleep, and I was almost shouting hallelujah. I was going, it's true, it's true, it's true. And there's somebody here, a dear friend named Martha, who's now a co-owner, I guess you could put it. And I couldn't wait to tell her, because she loves the history. I couldn't wait to tell Martha that it was true, that's the bar that was here before the fire. So
now, recently you were discussing online and through your page a story about this bar here, and is it down Bisbee or Tombstone?
you're talking about the back bar?
Yeah.
The back bar there, the beautiful back bar. I found out some more.
Tell us that history and the story, the connection between the two cities.
Well, I mentioned the picture behind us, and you see in that picture pre-fire that it's a different back bar. So the story of it being pulled out is probably not true unless, they put a new one in after. But I followed it real close. I think I would have known if they would have put a new back bar in. So what I believe happened with this back bar here was that it was installed after the fire, and that it came, my theory is it came from San Francisco down the Pacific coast, around the Baja, the Sea of California, or Cortez, or whatever they call it, and then up to Colorado, and then across land here.
Yeah.
That's how I think it got here. But, there's one in the Crystal Palace down in Tombstone, looks exactly like it. And it's a little bit of mystery. I'm researching it because they say that the one at the Crystal Palace is a copy. But Scott Stanford here, both he and I found a picture of the Crystal Palace, and it says 1880s, and that's there.
Yeah.
So I don't know how that worked. I found one other one. I forgot of this back bar. There's only 3 I know in existence, maybe 4, but I think it was called the Empire, made by Brunswick. Those guys.
Beautiful craftsmanship.
It's something else.
Just when I was setting up here, and pretty much every time we're sitting here at the Brad table at the Palace, as we see people walking in the door, you can tell the folks that are visiting or here for the first time, because they walk in and their eyes just open.
Right.
They look around, they see the woodwork, they see the images on the wall, the display cabinets, the walking history of Uncle Bob and his cohorts back there.
Right. You should see Tommy. Tommy does an imitation of the people walking in.
Good. Here he's
Some look in and they he's walking in.
do a play-by-play.
Yeah. He looks. Some people will just look around and they're gone. It's too much for them to handle.
But it is awe-inspiring to walk in and see. And I don't know is this copper? The plating on the roof?
I don't know. I haven't gotten that far. It looks like
it's like these big square plates. It's like a big grid pattern that a lot of these vintage buildings have. Now you go into some areas and you can tell it's faux.
Right.
These are all legit. They're all original. The crown molding and all that. It's just beautiful. And then of course that whole bar and the back bar. It's just incredible to look at, and the stairways leading up to the offices. Now, we were looking. Did you look at these?
I sure did. The ladies.
Tell us about those. Tell the listeners about.
You mean the soil? Yeah, they got great names. The Soiled Doves. Let's see. There's this one.
Teacup Sally.
There's one. Yeah, her name is Teacup Sally. But the nicknames for these, like Soiled Doves, or rehab women.
Why don't you give us a little history of what some of the entertainment in these saloons was like, and it ties into what we're talking about.
Well, one street over, Granite Street on the east side, was the red light district, and in between is Whiskey Row Alley, and so then you got Whiskey Row where all the bars were. So it was kind of easy way to do business. They would just meet in the alley there and discuss terms.
I think some of that's still going on.
Yeah, maybe. There's something going on in those alleys there.
That's for the Tommy episode. We'll find out all about that.
But that whole red light district was interesting because it wasn't. They were mentioned in the papers sometimes. They were called habitués. of Granite Street, and if you read that, everybody knew they were prostitutes here. But yeah, Martha brought in some. You had to have a license apparently to be a prostitute.
So it was a legal enterprise.
Yeah, and they got
similar to some of the Nevada counties and things like that.
Yeah, and then
they
have a picture that's kind of like advertising on there. I don't know if that's part of the license or not. You think I don't know if they hung on the wall like doctors, their credentials. I don't know.
One of the adjoining or adjacent saloons, Jersey Lily. Can you give us a little about that without drawing too much away from the beautiful palace? Of course, that's a beautiful spot as well.
I actually met the guy who opened the Jersey Lily, and it was a restaurant at one time. But what we're talking about is what was once the Palace Hotel. When it was rebuilt in 1901, upstairs was a really grand hotel. Probably the second best in Prescott, next to Hotel St. Michael's down the street there at the time, and. I don't know. It must some point business kind of waned or something.
Yeah.
I just didn't seem to do very well, and it was kind of shut down in the probably in the 50s and 60s. And then eventually a bar was opened up there. I don't think it was called Jersey Lily at first.
Yeah. Up top where they tout it as the only balcony overlooking the Whiskey Row. It's part of the bar.
And that's something you should do and that used to be the balcony of the hotel. But yeah, it's wonderful. It's where you can sit there and look at the plaza and people walking dogs on the plaza and all that kind of stuff. And people yelling at each other. And on Tuesdays, the political crowd getting mad at each other.
And on we'll plug it here on Wednesday night. There is a classic rock jam that happens every Wednesday night at the Jersey Lily Saloon
with Sky, right?
Sky, Conwell, and Glenn. They trade off a little bit. Nick Canuel, former guest of the show, plays up there on a regular basis. I think Sundays are his day. Little Larry and the Drive. They have set musicians up there, but it's live music pretty much throughout the week. Beautiful spot to hang out. Again, not drawn away from the Palace, but they're great spots to go and check them both out.
And here at the Palace, we can't plug him enough. Our friend Danny Romero.
Now he came by my place yesterday, pretty much all day. Him and Georgie Janik and Jordan Brambilla.
Oh, good.
The three of them came by, and then Les Lyman. Leslie
I know
Lyman,
of him.
Yeah. He came by in the morning. We were doing some video shoots of him playing, and then the trio came by and spent the rest of the day in there. And I figured out, because I'll do the quotes here as an artist, as a photographer. I'm not, the money ain't rolling in. But I figured out how I'm going to put my 8-year-old through college. Is periodically I'm going to invite these guys over, and they're not allowed to take their empty beer cans with them. And I figured just on the recycling alone, he's already got his freshman, sophomore year of college taken care of just from yesterday.
Brilliant.
My goodness. Brilliant. They've got to own stock in Coors. That's all I got to figure out.
I did that on river trips. I would keep the cans afterwards, and I'd have a whole truckload.
But Danny Romero, Arizona Territory Band, Arizona Territory Duo, Trio, and whoever else he can con into playing with him. He plays here every Friday, 5 p.m. to 8 p.m.
Yep. And he's the real deal.
Well, he plays from 5 to 5:05, and then he takes a break, and then he comes back about 6. No, I'm just kidding.
Because people come and talk to me. He's a talker. He likes to talk to people.
Yeah, 4 minutes away, 3 minutes away.
Yeah, where's Danny?
He's over there hanging out. But no, he's the staple here, along with you and Tommy and Phil here. I want to give Phil Cross on
the Friday night crowd
on here.
Yeah, we got sitting next to us a legend.
Yeah, but so Danny plays.
We're not going to talk about it right
now. Danny plays here every Friday, but then does special event shows also throughout the year here at the Palace, and he plays all over the row and all over Arizona. Right. But the Palace is kind of his anchor for his music talents here.
I call him the Palace Troubadour. He's got a show coming up on April 30th. He's doing Hank Williams and Hank Williams Jr.
Yeah, and he does some of the other Waylon and Willie shows. He does some of the tribute shows, and then they do some specialty shows. New Year's Eve, I believe they were here as well with the full band.
He writes a lot of original music that's very, very good.
And
very good.
He's been on the podcast, I don't know, half a dozen at least times. And we're going to have him on again. He's got a new EP coming out soon, so we want to talk to him about that. But he's getting ready to take the stage. Before he does, and then we'll wrap up. Again, we're here with Brad Courtney. Prescott's Original Whiskey Row is a book detailing the history of Prescott's Whiskey Row, including the beautiful Palace Restaurant and Saloon where we're sitting in right now. Give us a couple of we talked about one of your favorite stories of taking the bar out. Just give us a couple of the real gems that you became aware of in researching the history of Whiskey Row.
And I hope I could tell this one right, but there's a story I call it the Dynamite Demon of Whiskey Row, and why it is not one of those famous Western legendary stories, I don't know, because every time I tell it, people just go, wow, that really happened. But there was a guy named Bill Binkley. He married a lady named Bertha Hovey. Bertha was one of those Granite Street habitués, and he knew that.
The back alley girl?
But he knew that. He knew that. But what happened was when he married, shortly after they got married, she tells him, hey, guess what? I'm already married. Almost like it was a joke. And furthermore, we won't be living together. And this guy, Bill...
For some, that would be a perfect marriage.
Yeah. And this is what made him upset. Not that she was a prostitute, it's that she had another husband, But he would go over, the report called it, he'd go over to her Adobe and try to get her attention, and she would tease him, and he'd feel emasculated, and he got really angry, and eventually he decides that he was going to take care of it by like kind of a murder-suicide thing. And so what he did was he worked out at the Last Chance Mine, which is out in the Walker area, and he stole 6 sticks of dynamite, and he just kind of kept his eye on her. And in back of the Cabinet Saloon, which became the Palace, by the way, that's why you can go back to 1874, there was a dining room in the back near Whiskey Row Alley, and she worked at this place called the Double Decker, which was a house of prostitution where the parking garage is now. And so
again, I still think some of that business is going on in the garage.
There's something. Yeah, there's all kinds of little. I see the police monitoring it just the other day, but he hides the sticks of dynamite under the double decker, and he keeps her eye on her. And then one night in January, I think it was 1898, he notices her having dinner in the back of the Cabinet Saloon in the dining room at a table. A Chinese guy was waiting on him. And he crawled. She was with a colleague. Her name was Cora. That's all she was known by. But he crawled underneath the Cabinet Saloon, put the sticks of dynamite right underneath their feet, and his initial plan was to stay there and die with her. But he lit the fuse and he took off down the road there to a place called the Royal Saloon. He was in there about 30 seconds, and kaboom! Everybody runs toward the cabinet to see what was going on, including him. He gets here, and he looks, and everything's demolished, but standing there unhurt is Bertha. And he saw her, and he goes, his other plan was, once he saw her dead, he had some laudanum around his neck. He was going to take it and go with her into wherever they were going. But she was alive, and so people started thinking later that maybe she was the target. So they found Bill, and of course he denied it, and she denied it because she was a bigamist. So she said everything was fine, no problems between us. But he gave in, and he was sent to Yuma after a while there. I actually met his granddaughter, who's told me more of the story, and actually I have a picture of it and everything. But that's the story of the Dynamite Demon at Whiskey Row.
That is great.
Why that's not more famous, because it just blew up everything. But anyway, here's how she lived. There was a thick layer of linoleum in the dining room. So when the dynamite was lit and it ignited, she was like in the eye of the hurricane, so everything went out away from her.
Gotcha.
And it knocked over a 1,000-pound oven. That's how powerful the blast was. But she was okay. I think Cora had a little scratch, and the Chinese guy, I guess, had a little injury too. But considering, it took out almost the whole saloon, that's pretty good.
That is. Now, recently, we have changed hands here. Dave, who was the previous owner, have they just had the retirement party for him, or is it coming up?
This Sunday, I think it starts at 4.
So the day this airs,
Michelson.
actually, it'll be.
Yeah.
So we've got some new owners. We won't get too much into that because I want to sit down with them at some point. Danny and I were talking about that. Maybe you could join us. That'd be a good conversation.
That'd be great. I'd love to.
But some of the ownership of the Palace, again, has been the rumors, the myths, the legends. Doc Holliday and the Earp boys, did they have a hand in ownership at this point at this place at any point?
And that's one of those you asked earlier, like some of the legends and everything. Now let me start off right because I've been misunderstood. The Virgil was here. Virgil Earp, his law career, actually, that's a whole other story, which is a great story. It's in the book. It's in the book.
It's in the book.
Prescott's
Original Whiskey Row, available at milehighshow.com using that Amazon link. And where else?
Whiskey Row Books at gmail.com. $20 for a signed copy.
So Virgil.
Yeah. So Virgil's, his law career actually started here. It was a shootout that happened about a half mile from here. And he was really lauded for his part in that, and then it probably played a part why he became what he was in Tombstone. But Wyatt came here in 1979. There actually wasn't a Palace Saloon at the time, but there was the Cabinet Saloon, which became the Palace. That's so important.
That's a running theme of this show, the Cabinet Saloon.
Yeah, and it was the place to go. It was the gambling. Yeah. That's where Doc would have come and made his. They say he made like a $10,000 win in a poker game. It would have been at the Cabinet. So yes, it can be said that the Earps were here. It was just in a different form.
So they've got roots right here in Prescott, up and down the row. The stories I have heard is that Doc Holliday and Wyatt Earp owned the Palace together for some time, and other stories. And so
there's a lot that's been said, but
again, there's a lot of lore. There's a lot of myth, and there's a lot of legend.
The Earps weren't really that known at the time.
Yeah.
He became famous much later. So,
but I think Kevin Costner and Kurt Russell made him famous.
Especially Kurt, and then a Val with Doc. You can't beat that portrayal at all.
So, what we encourage folks to get, if you are interested at all in history in general, specifically Western history, and of course the history of Prescott and Prescott's Whiskey Row, including the beautiful Palace Restaurant and Saloon where we're sitting. Pick up Brad Courtney's book, Prescott's Original Whiskey Row, available through the email?
WhiskeyRowBooks at gmail.com.
To get your signed copy, or if you'd like to, you can go to milehighshow.com and use that Amazon link and pick up your own copy. And when you are in the Prescott area, or even if you're not in the Prescott area, if you are in Arizona, Nevada, Las Vegas, take a few hours trip. We're about 4 hours away from Vegas, and check out Prescott's Whiskey Row, and you can visit the Palace and check out their website, historicpalace.com. Again, that's historicpalace.com, and they also have a pretty active Facebook page where shows like Danny's shows and the storytelling shows and things like that are also advertised.
And I think the history here is greater than that of Tombstone and anywhere in the West. It really is.
Well, Brad, thanks for sitting down. We appreciate taking time to sit and talk with us. I hope this will not be the only time we sit down and talk. You've got great stories. You've got a new book that you're working on, so we'd like to talk to you as that comes closer to being published. And, of course, when we sit down with anybody here, including maybe the new owners, at the Palace Saloon, maybe you can join us, and that'd be a great time.
Awesome.
I'd like to once you get those touring muscles going again. Like we said, you'd taken a little break. I'd kind of like to do a little walking podcast with you, with some of the tourists too. As you're taking them around, we can hear some of their questions, talk to some folks, find out where they're from. Because as we said, as Tommy did the act out here, when people walk in this place, they're blown away, not just because of the architecture and the decorations, but we have, and I jokingly said, Uncle Bob, but there is a crew of guys and gals that hang out here in full period costume, or not even costume. It's authentic period dress. They hang out, they tell stories, they pose for pictures, they'll give you their own history, how they got here. We got a Union soldier walking through right now. And not even just the folks that dress up. You sit down here, and there's legit guys, cow punchers like Sean Collins sitting here, like Danny Romero, who are just hanging out because this is where they hang.
This is you meet some very interesting people.
I want to. I'm not even going to say who it is. I want to sit down with this gentleman sitting across from me, but he already told me. He goes, "We're going to sit down and talk first before you plug in the microphones," because he's got an interesting story. I did talk about his book, the podcast. I picked up his book a couple weeks ago here and talked about it in the intro to the episode I recorded that night over at the event center.
Don't ask me a question I can't answer.
But we got some interesting folks that just hanging out here. And again, check out Prescott's Original Whiskey Row by Brad Courtney and visit, it's upside down. Next show, professional broadcaster here. HistoricPalace.com, because that's where we're sitting in the beautiful Historic Palace Restaurant and Saloon.
Take a step back in time.
And this reminds me of that old WKRP when he looks at the wall and he goes, "It's now 5:20 and time for the 5 o'clock news." It is now 5:08 and time for the 5 o'clock show to start. Danny Romero, hey Danny, I'm gonna plug in your music intro and outro. So we'll have a couple of Danny Romero originals for the intro and outro here. Danny Romero Music is where you can find clips to his videos and find out how you can pick up his brand new EP that was recorded right down the road at Raven Studios. Brad, thank you so much.
Thank you, Matt. It was my pleasure. It really was.
And Tommy, thanks for your pantomime. That was great. That's some great radio when you get a pantomime.
And though they were after him with those hands, he'd saved many lives. But he'll run, steal, cuss and fight, and raise hell all night. With a pistol in his hand, spreading fear all across the land. His heart belonged to Dixie. She'd always got him through. Life is an outlaw, he knows, and nothing else that he can do. Well, he'll rob, steal, cuss and fight, and raise hell all night. With a pistol in his hand, spreading fear all through the land. His heart belonged to Dixie. She'd always got him through. Life is an outlaw, he knows, and nothing else that he can do.